Which of these statements are more palatable? The consequences of single motherhood or the effect fatherless households have on children? Good evening, honored guests, fellow Toastmasters, Mr. Toastmaster. Being raised by a single parent, this topic is very near and dear to me. In reality, those two statements bring about the same result. It's just a matter of perspective. As I connect the dots in my life, in hindsight, 18 years in a fatherless household, the psychological effects were devastating and very traumatic. I've experienced some dark and unspeakables. The struggles with self-esteem, the doubts, and that's when life was much, much simpler. Can you imagine the effects fatherless households have on children today? In America, youth today, tonight, almost 2 in 4 youth will come home to a fatherless household. Remember Ozzie and Harriet, the Huxtables, the Cleavers? What has happened to the morals of our country? Why such a shift in paradigm? Have we forgotten that the family is the most important social unit in society? And if we have, this is a fact that we must remember. The family is not only the basic societal unit, it is also the basic sexual unit, the basic child raising unit, the basic communication unit, and the all-around basic fun and friendship unit. Wouldn't you all agree? As a rule, when the families are strong, our society is strong. Societies begin to break down when the families become weak. 83% of all single-parent households are headed by mothers. Single motherhood was once largely limited to poor women and minorities. Now, single motherhood is the new norm. The nuclear family, what has happened to it? Years ago, if a young girl got pregnant out of wedlock, she was considered to be an outcast, and hence, the shotgun wedding. Even the widow became scorned and thought to be a threat in the subdivision she once lived with her husband and children. In 1992, Dan Quayle condemned Murphy Brown for giving birth outside of wedlock. Ask yourselves, why has the pendulum swung so far to the left? 100 years ago, fatherless households were not the exception, were not the rule, they were the exception. And have we thought where we will be another 100 years from now? With fatherlessness increasing exponentially? There is a fatherless epidemic that is crippling our nation. Statistics have shown almost every social ill that America is faced with is stemmed from a fatherless household. Children from fatherless homes are more likely to be poor, become involved in drug and alcohol abuse, drop out of school, and suffer from health and emotional behavior problems. Here are some statistics. 43% of US children live without their father. Now, if I don't quote another statistic tonight, that one right there should break all our hearts. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless households. 90% of all homeless and runaway children come from fatherless households. 85% of all children who show behavior disorders come from fatherless households. 80% of all rapists come from where? Fatherless households. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless households. 70% of youth in state-operated institutions come from fatherless households. 85% of all youth in prison come from where, Susan? Fatherless households. 71% of pregnant teenagers lack a father. 71% of all adolescent substance abusers come from a fatherless household. Fatherless families are 44% more likely to raise children in poverty. Let's all take a collective pause and think who, what, when, where, and how this has happened to America. My mother and the Murphy Browns of our nation must understand the effect of fatherless households. I liken that effect to an iceberg because it's not what you see above the surface that sank the Titanic. We must know unequivocally that God, in His infinite wisdom, had the foreknowledge that the prototypical family was best served with a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. We must remember that when the families are strong, our society is strong. And we must collectively remend the moral fabric of our great nation by adhering to the principles of marriage. We must revisit the strength of the nuclear family, which has brought us thus far as being one of the greatest nations in the world. And we must realize that when the families are weak, our society is weak. And we must remember who loses the most, our great nation, by the way of our children. Mr. Toastmaster.